What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here I'm inside Project CB9's engine bay, where we no longer have an engine and transmission. So now this is the perfect opportunity to go ahead and get this engine bay prepared before the H22 and the 5-speed goes in position. So let's go ahead and get started. We're gonna go ahead and thoroughly clean out this engine bay. This thing is very dirty, a lot of oil residue and dirt from the 28 years it's been in existence. So we're just gonna try and get this firewall cleaned up, the subframe cleaned up of all the oil, underneath the battery tray here, underneath the cruise control unit, and then inside this area, that's the cavity of where the clutch master cylinder mounts to, and then the clutch pedal mounts to that. There's some leaf buildup, so I'm gonna take a vacuum with a long attachment, suck out whatever I can, and we're just gonna go to town and clean this engine bay. So what we're gonna use to do that, and the tools we'll be needing for this is some miscellaneous kitchen brushes to get into some crevices, gunk engine cleaner, and simple green cleaner. And hopefully we'll have some decent results with this cleaning process. And if this doesn't do too well, my neighbor's got a pressure washer, so we'll go ahead and do that route if needed. So let's go ahead and get this thing cleaned up here. All right, guys, look at all that crap that's underneath that fuse box. So just take your time, take away those 3 10mm bolts, lift up this fuse box, and look at all those leaves that are just collected there. That's just an imitation for rust, for all the moisture to be trapped under there. So go ahead and suck that away with the vacuum, and underneath that fuse box should be good to go. Okay, one thing to mention before we start cleaning this engine bay is there's 3 open wiring harnesses right here. I just basically encapsulated that with a plastic bag and wrapped it with some tape. Same thing on this side. There's 2 open wiring harnesses over here, so plastic bag and some tape. I don't want any moisture or any cleaning agent inside those raw connectors, so better safe and take the extra 2 minutes to protect those harnesses from any corrosion or potential damage. And now with that said, everything is vacuumed out, all the loose particles, leaves, etc. I believe we're ready to start spraying this engine bay and starting to scrub and hosing this thing down. So here goes nothing. After about 30 to 45 minutes of spraying and scrubbing and rinsing, engine bay is finally clean. Big differences, especially under this power steering area. I remember it was gunked up with a bunch of oily residue. Back here on the firewall, a lot of spots and whatnot, a lot of dirt. For the most part, it turned out pretty well. I'd say this engine bay is looking like it's about a 2-year-old car, maybe 3-year-old. If you wanted a car that looks like it was brand new, you'd have to basically strip this whole engine bay down and just repaint it, but I'm not going to that extreme on this. But, you know, I'm fairly satisfied. Now, there was one issue with cleaning this engine bay. I don't know which product caused it. It started taking the paint off the shock tower right here. So now it's down to the black primer. So I don't understand what happened here. And I don't know which product did it, the gunk or the simple green, because I kind of was alternating back and forth. But anyhow, I'm probably gonna get some aerosol touch-up at the local paint shop and mask this off and touch it up so it's, you know, looking uniform. But just don't understand why that happened. But anyhow, it's just a small little hiccup right here. But for the most part, this engine bay looks spotless. All right, this should be a quick and easy installation. These are for the rear splash guards. My CB9 did not come with rears, only fronts. So we're gonna go ahead and match the rear bumper with that. Now, in order to do so, when I remove the hardware at the yard, you want to take these little metal retainers, and that's basically what holds the screws in position on the backside, and that slides on the very bottom of the bumper right there. Now, the top mount looks like it's self-tapping, and I've already removed the existing screw that's in the fender as well. So it mounts right here, right there, and right there. Tools to do so is you want to get a right angle Phillips head and a small Phillips head. You're not going to have the clearance to get a regular screwdriver between the tire and the bumper, so use a right angle right here and right there. You could probably use a small screwdriver right there. So let's go ahead and install these rear splash guards. Alright, over here on the rear subframe, you've got two hoses here, and they were cut upon removal of the engine transmission process. Couldn't get access to the clips, but anyhow, the transmission that we have is from a 98 to 2002 Accord, which does not have the inputs for this power steering lines. And I believe what these two lines do is it'll either increase or decrease the resistance of the feel of the steering wheel. So I don't think that's going to be too big of a deal. I've talked with some people on the Accord boards and they said it's not going to be an issue. So what we're going to do is we've got this extra line here that we got from the clutch master cylinder. This is rubber hose with the braided line that protects the outside, and we're basically just going to loop this and then install it in place right there. So let's just go ahead and loop this power steering line here and remove the cut portions right now. So I'll go ahead and do that. All right, here is our package of silicone hoses for both the engine and engine bay itself. As you can see here, these things are pretty thick, and I've actually read up on the comparison of silicone hoses versus rubber hoses, that silicone can actually outlast your car. So I'm actually skeptical about that, but you know, I've got the radiator hoses in my Acura RSX, and those things have been on the car for well over, I don't know, 13 years and held up pretty well, knock on wood. So we're going to go ahead and replace all the rubber hoses that are on the engine and inside the engine bay with these silicone hoses. So let's go ahead and start on the firewall units. Okay, we're going to go ahead and replace these two hoses, which goes to the heater box inside the car. Can you imagine trying to replace those hoses with the engine in place? I mean, this is some tight tolerances. You'd have to remove this intake manifold at least in order to get access to that thing, because I mean, this is just tight tolerances. And you think it can reach up between the firewall and that subframe with those lines in the way? Absolutely not. So now's the time to do it. So let's go ahead and remove those hoses. Next step of the process, we need to remove this power steering line. So go ahead, disconnect this connector, squeeze this in, pull it out, and then we need to raise up the car and go underneath the car and see where this hard line goes, because that's going under the rear subframe. So I'll go ahead and put a piece of tape on it, raise up the car, and go ahead and disconnect this line. Okay guys, got the car jacked up, 2 jack stands, and the floor jack is on the front subframe for safety. And I put a piece of tape up on the line of what we're looking at, so I'm underneath the car, I can keep track of it. But if I trace this hose right here, we have now a protective cover covering all these hoses. So what we've got here looks like a 10mm right there, another 10mm right there, and another 10mm right there. So let's go ahead and remove those 3 10mm bolts and see what we're working with here. Just for reference here, this port is the one that's closest to the passenger side. So in case you can't see what you're working with here, if you got an engine in the way, etc., this is the one closest to the passenger side. So now we need to go up on the engine bay and pull this line up here. As you can see, the sway bar is a little bit in the way, but we'll be able to, get this thing pulled up. It's moving right there, so this thing is going to come out pretty quickly, especially with no engine in the way. Okay, now I can go in further detail of why I removed the power steering line from Project CB9. I've got the Honda Prelude power steering line right beside it here. This is the one we just pulled out. It's hard to see on camera, but the diameter of this opening here for the power steering pump is a lot smaller than the one for the Honda Prelude right there. So this, I don't know, looks about an 1/8 inch bigger in diameter without taking a measuring tape to it, but that's why we have to modify the power steering line for CB9 for the Prelude head right here. So what we need to do is we need to take this head and we need to put it on to the power steering line on Project CB9 right here. And how we do that is I'm going to go ahead and take this up to my local Napa, and they make hydraulic lines. So there's probably a lot of machine shops or maybe even specialty auto part stores that would do this for you, but I do know my local Napa will do this. So basically they're going to have to cut off the Prelude head, cut off the CB9 head, put the Prelude head onto the CB9 hose, and then we should have a compatible power steering pump line for Project CB9. And let me go ahead and show you what's going on with that. And here is the H22. We are going to retain this power steering pump on this motor here. We can't put the F22 pump onto the H22, and that is due to the fact that the hood will not close due to clearance issues. So we're going to retain the power steering pump on H22, and later on down the line we're going to change out the alternator, and we're going to change out the AC compressor as well, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But main thing is we're concentrating on the connection for the power steering pump. So I'm going to go ahead and take this up to Napa tomorrow, and they'll make the modification, and then we'll reinstall this power steering line. So basically that's the game plan for the engine bay so far. Successful trip at Napa Auto Parts. They made the modification that I needed done, which is basically install the Prelude top line right here onto the CB9 line. And this is basically the finished result. And this line actually has some flex to it, so I can unscrew this, twist it wherever I need to do, make sure it's tight again. That way there's no, tension on that power steering line. So let's go ahead and get this reinstalled. Connect this electrical connector connect this to the steering box, and then we'll wait for the H22 to get dropped into the car before we can make the final connection. All right, and here is the rear engine mount we'll be using for this project. This is the innovative 75A polyurethane set that I purchased. Now this uses a 3-point mounting system right here. And as you can see, this is the original rear engine mount that was on the car. Actually, it was torn. There was a little loop here that was removed when we were removing the engine. But this is basically lines up with the 3-mount system. All right, even though this Honda Accord is 28 years old, this includes some crazy technology back in the day. This is a vacuum-assisted rear motor mount, which helped isolate all the vibrations, especially when the car was at a standstill. And as you can see, it's a little shorter than what we're going to use because the manual and automatic rear motor mounts differed from how they mounted onto the engine itself. And as you can see the difference here between the innovative and the OEM, the difference in heights. But you just gotta make sure that the mounting point system that you've got is gonna line up, because I believe that there's 2 different choices. I think there's a 3-point and a 4-point. So we'll go ahead and bolt this into the engine bay right now. Next thing we need to do is take this clutch master cylinder line, which will then connect to the slave cylinder. And we need to secure this to the engine bay somehow. So I'm gonna go attach it to here, and I'm gonna attach it to the underside right there, so get this thing secured. So let's get this thing done. Well, all right guys, we were successful in preparing this engine bay before the H22 and 5-speed drops into position. We're able to modify the power steering hose connection for the transmission, install the rear motor mounts, and change out the heater core hoses. In addition to power washing and thoroughly clean this engine bay out. Next step of the process, we need to start working on the H22 itself. Hope you guys can tune along for that. If you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Have a great day.